the Old Crypt. I had a friend who was a photographer. He loved creating black and white works and capturing landscapes that evoked a sense of bleakness and dreariness. He enjoyed creating oppressive feelings through his photos. Recently, he emailed me about how he ended up at a local cemetery during work hours. With his camera in hand and landscapes that matched his taste, he started photographing the black trees and ravens on the crosses. He was especially drawn to the view of an old crypt. Before the revolution, many Polish Catholics and Jews lived here and built such crypts. He began photographing it from various angles. Naturally, entering the crypt didn't even cross his mind, out of respect for the deceased. In short, my friend decided to come back the next day with better lighting equipment and a stronger camera to take high-quality photos. On his way home, he flipped through the photos on his camera, deleting some and keeping others, as usual. That evening, while editing his favorite photos in Photoshop, he noticed something odd in one of the pictures. There were imprints in the snow around the crypt that looked like the outlines of people lying around it. The outlines seemed to be of men, lying in a donut shape in the snow, clearly in outerwear. He started working with layers and, in one of the settings, saw that the crypt door was slightly ajar and a pair of eyes were peeking out from the crack. The outlines of the people lying around became clearer. It seemed they were all lying with their heads pointed towards the half-open door. It gave the impression that they had been thrown about like kittens by whatever was inside the crypt. To say my friend was scared would be an understatement. He immediately began chatting online with psychics, fortune tellers, and charlatans about it. Someone, with seemingly good intentions, advised him to return to the same spot the next day, open the crypt door, and photograph it from different angles. They said that by doing so, my friend would understand what kind of entity it was. The letter ended there. My friend was found near that ill-fated crypt, his stomach ripped open, intestines strewn across the snow, blood around the crypt. I managed to see him at the scene before the investigation team allowed the medics to remove the body. What struck me was his twisted and horrified face. His mouth was open in a scream, and his eyes couldn't be closed, even by the medics. He was clutching his camera with a death grip. The only footprints around were those of the investigators and the usual patrol officers. There were no traces, no motives, no clues. This heinous crime shocked the entire town. Everyone was talking about this horrific event. About a month later, I was speaking with the lead investigator on the case as part of my job. He told me that when they confiscated the camera, they immediately checked the memory card for any images of suspects. The camera had only one photo, the open door of the crypt with 2 red dots inside, resembling the eyes of an animal that can reflect light. The investigator added that while researching the history of the crypt, he came across information from pre-war times. During the period of collectivization, local men decided to rob several burial sites of Catholic and Jewish origin. They were found near that crypt, with their stomachs ripped open, curled up on the ground like kittens, with expressions of horror frozen on their faces. The dark path home. It was autumn, and it got dark very early. At 10:22 p.m. I was walking home from practice and turned into a pitch-dark alley from the bus stop. I had to use my phone to light the way and to make it less scary. Walking alone, I played some music softly and started humming along. I reached the middle of the alley. almost home and in my cozy bed. Suddenly, my phone's light dimmed slightly, thanks to my Android's battery, and I couldn't see beyond a step ahead. I had to turn off the music. Imagine my surprise when I saw a person standing ahead. "Hello, can you help me? Could you light the way with your phone or something? I'm afraid of falling into a manhole." Yes, they open them in autumn and you walk with fear. No answer. The silhouette just slightly turned. "Can you help me?" I repeated. Then with a floating gait, the figure moved towards me. I couldn't see the face, but I distinctly remember the image. A coat, a hat, and shoes that echoed a menacing rhythm as their heels clicked on the pavement. I didn't know there were still kind people around. I exhaled in relief. It was strange that he walked in complete darkness without using a flashlight. As soon as he reached me, he extended his hand. Shining my phone on it, I saw an old matchbox. Well, better than nothing. Without thinking, I lit his face to see my savior. Oh, how I wish I hadn't. His eyes were bloodshot, pupils covering the irises, and his face had a bluish tint. I froze in horror. His smile and foul breath snapped me out of it. I turned and ran back, sprinting so fast the wind whistled in my ears. But even through the noise, I heard, "You forgot the matchbox." The voice was too high-pitched for a man and horribly creaky. I ran to the nearest group of people and, barely catching my breath, realized I had dropped my phone. I cursed everything in that moment. I decided to go home without it, taking the longer, well-lit route, about 30 minutes. Reaching my building, I used the key to enter. I walked through the entrance, climbed to my floor, and saw my phone, the matchbox, and a note lying at my apartment door. "You forgot this." To say I was scared would be an understatement. The lights in our building are motion activated. Even if you don't make a sound, they turn on if you wave. I live on the 5th floor. I took out my keys and started opening the door and noticed the light turned on the 3rd floor. I could see the reflection from the windows, but I didn't hear any noise. Quickly unlocking my door, I rushed inside and locked it with all the bolts. Peeking through the peephole, I saw no light on my floor. Phew, it passed. As if reading my thoughts, the light turned on, and there stood the man. Oh God. I'm not religious, but I started muttering prayers I barely knew. I thought, like in the scary stories I'd read, I could banish this in real life. Don't believe those stories. No prayers helped. The man brought his hand to the door and knocked lightly. Jumping back, I grabbed my phone and quickly dialed the police. They answered, and I started giving my address. Before I could say the apartment number, the phone died. Damn you, Android! Hugging my knees to my chest, I stared at the door with tear-filled eyes. Another knock. When would it leave? I was awakened by someone trying to break down the door. I screamed and had a hysterical fit. It all stopped. Just a light knock on the door and a phrase. "Open up! Police!" I approached the door, opened it, and there was no one there. That was the last straw. I ran to the stairwell, banging on all the doors. The only person who opened was an old lady, who immediately pulled me into her apartment and locked the door. She crossed herself and began asking what happened. Grandma Liuda gave me tea and said I should stay with her until morning, and she would call her relative, a priest, in the morning. I'm very grateful to her. Nothing like that happened again. The prank was a success. At 2 a.m., my mobile phone rang. I struggled to open my eyes and looked at the display. Number unavailable. Yes? Silence on the other end. My eyes were drooping and I was about to hang up when suddenly a growl came from the phone. It was strange, almost unnatural, with an electronic raspiness. Someone's messing around, I thought, and hung up. A couple of minutes later, the phone rang again. I barely had time to answer. I had just pressed the call button when hissing and a quiet, almost growling voice came through. "I'm coming for you. Very soon." The line went dead with a series of beeps. Cursing, I put the phone on the nightstand by my bed and stared at the ceiling. 5 minutes later, something started scratching at my bedroom door. Softly, as if testing whether I was asleep. Then with a crash, the door flew open and Ait ran into the room. With a pale, round face devoid of a nose, black holes for eyes, and a glowing head. It hissed, screamed, and shrieked wildly. At that moment, and I'm not ashamed to admit this, what would you have done in my place? I wet myself. Suddenly, familiar laughter filled the room. The lights came on, and there stood my sister instead of the monstrous figure. She removed her mask, turned off the flashlight, and laughed so hard that she probably woke up the whole building. We lived in a 3-room apartment with our parents and sister, but our parents had gone to the cottage for the weekend. "Are you crazy?" I was still in shock. Didn't she realize I could have died from fright? "Oh, come on," my sister laughed. "You should have seen your face. You." She wrinkled her nose. "Did you wet yourself?" And she burst out laughing again. I sat half upright on the bed, unsure whether to give her a good smack or hope she'd get her comeuppance. "Who called?" I asked. My sister, having calmed down, explained that she and Anton, her boyfriend, who often stayed over when our parents were away, had downloaded some sounds from a movie, then arranged to hide the caller ID and called me. "No," she choked with laughter. "I can't believe you fell for it." "Idiot," I fumed. "Don't you understand I could have had a heart attack?" "Oh, relax," she waved dismissively. "You didn't. It's good to get scared before bed. It helps you sleep better. Go take a shower." She looked at my blanket. "At least you won't stink." She laughed again and went to her room. Well, I thought, what next? And what else would that idiot Anton teach her? She used to be a normal, modest girl. Then I heard my sister scream from her room. Yeah, right, I thought, and headed to the bathroom. Another scream came from her room, but I didn't react. If I rushed into her room, I'd probably find Anton and my sister laughing and taking pictures of me in wet underwear, then maybe even posting them online. No thanks. I've learned my lesson. After showering, I had to soak the blanket in the bathtub too. I changed and headed to my sister's room to demand their blanket for the night. Seemed fair, since mine needed washing and I wanted to sleep. They could cuddle and keep warm. Entering my sister's room, I nearly wet myself again. On the floor lay my sister with a look of utter horror on her slightly bluish face. It didn't even occur to me that this could be another prank, as Anton sat on a chair, or what was left of him. His stomach was ripped open, intestines spilled out, eyes gouged out, ears cut off, and lying by his feet. On my sister's 19-inch flat monitor was a single image. 2 words in red on a black background. Funny, huh? I vomited. Naturally, I was accused of Anton's murder. The autopsy revealed that my sister had died from shock, but her death occurred before Anton's, meaning she didn't die from seeing her beloved in that state, but from seeing something else. Perhaps the very creature that killed Anton. I was repeatedly questioned by investigators. Thanks to a hefty bribe, I avoided prison. We had to sell the apartment. My parents don't believe I'm innocent. Last Thursday, I dreamt of my sister. She said we'd be together again soon. For some reason, I believe her.